Kingston Cole,
Present.
Stephen Keys,
Here.
Lucy Dilworth,
Here.
Rebecca Suggs,
Here.
Pat Randolph,
Present.
Larry Chu,
Here.
Max Perry,
Here.
Carolyn Longstreth,
Here.
and myself. Okay, so we're all here and accounted for. Wonderful. That's great. All right, so on to the next item is item 3, which is agenda adjustments. Does anyone at this time have any adjustments they'd like to make to the agenda? If you do, please just physically raise your hand. And with that said, there's no change to the agenda. We'll move forward. Item number 4 is open time for public expression. And you'll be given 3 minutes for open time. If anyone would like to speak at this time, we have one raised hand, Bruce Bartell. And Mark, do you unmute him? Is that how it plays?
Allison takes care of that for us.
Allison, okay, Allison.
It's nice having a pro on board, huh?
Yes, it is.
Well, hi, committee members. I'd like to congratulate the COC on making their subcommittee meetings available for public viewing. While as a viewer, it's kind of frustrating that you can't participate, but I understand that's part of the rules, and there is no raise your hand portion or anything, or you can't wave, but it's nice knowing you can listen in, and watching the videos is nice to have to be able to go back to. So thank you for doing that. I wasn't sure I'd be able to make it today, so I had sent out some material to Mark, and I think he was going to pass it on to you all. And I can either wait till the appropriate time in the meeting or cover some of those things now. Your pleasure.
Bruce, I suggest when we get to that agenda item, since it is one of the agendized items.
Will do.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And I see no other raised hands. So with that, we will move forward. Item number 5 is the purpose of tonight's meeting, which is the proposed Citizen Oversight Committee bylaws review. And this is a recommendation from the COC bylaws ad hoc subcommittee. And we'll discuss the draft bylaws and receive input from other members at this point. And Max, are you going to open this again, or is another member of your committee going to start?
I'm going to open it and then we'll turn to the others. So whenever you're ready.
Hey, we are ready, Max. It's all yours. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your excellent feedback at our last meeting. We took notes and remembered as best we could from our notes and from our memory what everyone had given in terms of verbal feedback. We received written correspondence as well from Larry Chu, which was excellent, well detailed and well laid out. And we met and went over all of Larry's as well as the verbal comments that we had notes from. And then we received an excellent written feedback on the bylaws from Larry Minikes. And so we met a second time and went over all of Larry's content that he suggested. Of course, we could not, include everything that everyone suggested, but we did discuss everything that was talked about. In some places, there were contradictory suggestions, and in others, there were things that we had changed at the first meeting, which then we changed back and moved around. So rest assured, and of course, the videos are available. So if you wish, you can go back and see our discussion, but rest assured that we definitely discussed and took everything into account, and very much appreciate both of our Larrys for taking the time to take a deep dive and write it out as well. I'm going to go through articles 1 through 3. I think that it makes sense to get feedback on each one individually, right? So we'll do Article 1, see if there's feedback, Article 2, see if there's feedback, Article 3. Then Lucy will take Article 4, which is the meatiest and probably the most controversy or discussion will probably be on that one. And then Rebecca's going to take 5, 6, and 7, and then Pat will finish with 8, 9, and 10. So if you have something for a later item, just save that for that portion, keeping in mind that some things are more about the entirety of the document. So we'll do our best as we can as we go through. One thing I did want to ask is it helpful for me to screen share or for someone else on staff to do so, or do people have it in front of them and actually it would make sense not to screen share because people have it on their screen already?
I have it on my
Either way.
screen.
All right, seeing none, we'll just do this, but if anyone requests a screen share, happy to do so. Okay, so Article 1, I think this is pretty straightforward. This is, what is our name, right? And identifying us as the committee. Does anyone have any issues or suggestions for this article, or is this okay?
Fine.
All right, excellent. I'll ask Mark and Larry as our chair, are we going to invite public feedback on each article individually or at the end?
I think though it may be probably easier for the members of the public to be able to offer any feedback as we hit each article. That would be my recommendation. Hit an article, ask the committee members if there's a question, see if there's any public comment, and then any deliberation and move to the next article. It may slow us down a little bit, but I think it'll be easier for the members of the public to stay on track.
Great. Well, I'm not the chair of this meeting, so I'll invite our illustrious chair to invite public comment. Larry, if you want to do the public comment.
Sorry, I was actually reading. Do we have any raised hands at this point? Let me see.
What,
Seeing none, we do not. Carolyn, you have your
Yeah.
hand up.
I thought that what Mark just said is the committee would present the article in the draft, and then the members would ask questions and then, or make comments, and then the public would speak. Did I get that wrong?
That's correct, but when I asked if there was any comment from the members of the COC, no one had any. What did you
Okay,
have?
on Article 1, huh?
Yeah.
You're still on Article 1?
Article 1.
Oh, okay. All set.
Great. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to Article 2. This is the purpose. This is a little bit of a change. We simplified things to make it just very clear what the purpose is, right? Previously, we had additional parts of this. It was longer. There was even a suggestion to incorporate additional verbiage into this section. We chose to put that those sorts of getting at what the responsibility or the actions that the MWPA's Citizens Oversight Committee takes into the responsibilities section. So if anyone has any comments on this, obviously, let's discuss it, but just framing that as, think about whether it makes sense to put it in this section or this article or versus the responsibilities.
Carolyn, you have your hand raised again?
Okay, yes, well, that's what I thought, where we thought we were when I raised my hand before, but honestly, I prefer the more spelled out version that we had before. I think it's an opportunity for us to amplify a little bit on the purpose of the committee, and this is shrinking it the way I read it. So that's my comment. I mean, the first two sentences of the JPA paragraph on our committee might serve, but they don't really, just to repeat the JPA also doesn't really, it misses an opportunity, I think. So.
Kingston and then Stephen.
Yeah, I'm of a different opinion. I really think, I'm looking at the language from the previous version. I really prefer this one. I prefer it to be open so we have opportunities to find. I mean, we don't know all the things we want to look into yet. All right. And I think it's very important we have general language, which is in the current version, that allows us to do that. I simply don't know where we're going completely. And I think we won't find out for quite a while. So I want to keep it as relatively general as possible.
Please, Stephen.
Yeah,
And then Larry.
this is a question partly for Carolyn, sort of following up on that. What is the opportunity that she sees in it? And does she have a sense that by not spelling out things that we are limiting ourselves, or what? In
Possibly.
general,
I mean, I don't have the previous language in front of me. But I remember I think Lucy said this last time, that it's up to us with our bylaws to define our committee and what we're about and what we're going to do. And it's just so simplified with this that it doesn't, yeah, I prefer a little more detail.
okay. So,
Thank you. Larry, floor is yours.
I would agree with what Carolyn said, but for a different reason. Originally, one of my suggestions was to at least put in the enabling language in the legislation. That's at least what we do at a minimum. There are other things I know that some people would like to do, and that still requires approval of the board. Right now, by removing everything other than a simple sentence and describing it as work, it makes it ambiguous. We don't have any clear direction. And, it could go all over the place. It could take us all over the place without us having a grounded position in terms of what it is we're actually supposed to be doing and what it is that we want to do.
Yeah, I think it was the JPA basically refers to reviewing the finances. That's our key purpose. And then also the work plan. And so those two things I think would be good to include. And I kind of agree with what Larry said. Then, maybe we're broadening our purpose more than, maybe what the board would approve, or I don't know. Yeah.
Without taking us down to another section, there's references to being able to comment on the work plan. I'm fine with that. You can also do so as a member of the public, but to actually have, a formal opinion on it, is that really within our purview? I asked that question the last time. We are not a technical advisory committee, so what would be our function in trying to have specific feedback on the work plan? I mean, how does that work?
Well, the work plan is mentioned in the JPA as well.
Well, we know it's mentioned in the JPA, but the COC has not been tasked to evaluate, opine, and provide direction on the work plan.
Well, let me check the language. I thought it,
Yes.
mentioned it.
If I may, Lucy had her hand up, and this part can continue, but let's bring Lucy in because she did have her hand up. Lucy, please.
So just to be clear, that in the language of the JPA formation, it mentions that we're to provide feedback on the work plans. And the structure of when, Larry, you ask, what would we be doing? We aren't there to blather or waste the time of the committee getting down to work. We're there to participate when we see a potential for a deviation on the expenditure of funds, something like that. The concept is for us to be proactive rather than waiting till the end of the year and then saying, that was, this was quite the wrong direction to go. If we can be in there and say, before this gets finalized, can we be aware of this or that? I think that's a much more useful function for us. And I think would be much more helpful to the agency.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that statement. Where I don't want us going off the rails is to get to the point where we feel like we're telling the board which projects to pick,
Oh,
because
no.
that's not in
No.
our role.
That's right.
So when we're going to
so
get to this, by the way,
Just that clarity needs to be put into the bylaws.
let's wait till we get to then another section and we'll discuss it.
But
Okay.
because this is at the top,
Mm.
it also impacts a lot of the discussion later. So, we'll take it when it comes up again, but in a large respect, I'm teeing this up for more discussion later.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Lucy. And let me comment that when I saw the language, I thought, as Kingston did, I was actually going to say I concur with Kingston, precisely. And then Larry, you spoke and you ruined it because you're right. We should have the enabling language at minimum in there. It clarifies our purpose. So your comments are very much appreciated. Thank you. Max, unless there's another comment here, let's bring it back to Max.
Sure. Well, I can see us going a couple of ways here, right? We could take a vote, right? A formal vote, and see where people lean. Or, one thing that's a little bit unclear to me is whether, Larry and Carolyn, you're suggesting, putting some of these discussions till Article 4, right? Because that's when we're going to be talking about our responsibilities. And we could come back to Article 1 and make a decision based on that. Or if there's a feeling that we should incorporate the enabling legislation's verbiage, then we could just vote on it now.
I don't think we can take votes. This is informational only. What you could do, I believe, is put the language in front of us for a meeting next time. And perhaps that's the way to do it. Mark, I might lean on you for this, or
Well,
Larry.
A couple things I was going to mention as far as process, and what I was going to suggest is is 3 steps, and our board and executive committee and finance committee tend to run into this as well, is that we are so quick to get into deliberation. And we kind of bypass any questions one may have of the people that did the work. So really the process that we should focus on is whoever is presenting that particular article says, this was the reasoning why this article is written. Then we have questions. If people said, okay, I was wondering why this, then we go to public comment so we can hear the public's feedback. Then we get into deliberation.
Okay.
As far as voting, it was, we're not approving the bylaws based on the way the agenda was written today. We are soliciting feedback, and I don't think there's any harm in taking informal votes just to get the feel of the committee for each particular article. But at the end, it would not be a final vote for approval or not of the bylaws. And I'll lean on Larry Chu, like as suggested, because Larry's got so much experience with Brown Act and this type of process.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful, to our subcommittee, right, is to have an indication of how folks are feeling, how everyone's feeling, right? Because otherwise, it's going to be, oh, one person thinks this way, one person thinks that way. A few folks maybe didn't speak on every item, right? And so then, I'd hate for us to have the discussion all over again, right, at the next meeting. So just having clarity, whether it's an informal vote or if maybe just going around and inviting everyone just to say, hey, I think this or I think that, and then we can, jot down a note of how, broadly people are feeling.
Larry, please.
Yeah, I would concur with Max on that. There's no reason why you can't get a general direction in terms of where the group is heading.
It could be as simple as a thumbs up,
Yeah,
rather than doing a roll call type vote, which would how we would normally do if it was a formal vote.
Great. Okay, so we got that set. So let's take it to the public. At this point, would anyone like to raise their hand in the public? Okay, so we have Bruce. Bruce, please feel free.
Thank you. I have mixed feelings. I liked the previous version, like with Carolyn, where it spelled out a little bit further, gave further detail. And in the discussion, it seems like the section on purpose of the organization got diverted to the responsibilities of the members. And can you have responsibilities of the members where the purpose is not defined and where they're not congruous? So the previous language I thought was okay. I thought that there were 2 items that should have been reversed. And I think I provided some previous written agreement to that. And I think there was discussion at the previous meeting of this group about also changing the order, I think switching number 2 and 3. But it both looks kind of naked on the purpose, but at the same time, I'll be darned, it's actually pretty powerful as a standalone. And your purpose is to oversee the work of the MWPA, and I couldn't help but to think that some people are going to be a little bit shocked to see that sentence on the board, but that's your title and that's your job. So I don't have a problem with it. Maybe a little expansion might be in order.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We appreciate your comments. And Ron Arliss, excuse me. Ron, the floor is now yours. You'll have to unmute.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, an interesting discussion. Larry and I go way back. Sounds familiar from the city council, but anyway, I would propose that actually you take that sentence and purpose and add a little expansion / explanation by adding something to the effect. This is what I jotted down. Oversee the work of the MWPA as further explained in, comma, but not limited to responsibilities stated in Article 4, comma, below, period. That way you, as Bartel said, have a very powerful, statement with emphasis that is on the oversight for the citizens, all the citizens of Marin. And then you reference your responsibilities as quote explained in but not limited to. So you sweep in the things that Carolyn and Larry Chu talked about while keeping it brief and powerful as to what I see is the emphasis of the citizens oversight part of it, which is critical to the functioning of this MWP. So that would be my suggestion. And then you guys could all agree on it, vote, and move on.
Ron, thank you so much. That was really helpful. I see Larry smiling. Larry, did you want to add anything to that please?
No, just do like Ron said.
Thank you. Did I see another hand? Was there a hand raised there? No. I see no other public comments, so we'll bring it back to Max. And Max, you want to get feedback, I believe.
I think the next section, as Mark identified, is time for questions. So
questions, public comment, deliberation.
Deliberation.
So
right.
you'd be at deliberation now.
So deliberation. I personally, I can't speak for my 3 colleagues on the bylaws subcommittee, but I personally liked that suggestion that was made in that last comment. I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you go back and look at the bylaws subcommittee, I mean, we were having these exact same discussions, and we started, moving sentences around and adding and subtracting, and eventually we said, you know what? Actually, what we do is we oversee the MWPA, so let's just leave it at that. And anything we want to say that we, do to serve out that purpose, let's put that in our responsibilities, right? So I think the suggestion from the public that we simply reference that, right, and make that very explicit, I think was a great one. Yeah, I'll leave my comments at that.
Great. Would anyone else like to comment at this point? Kingston and then.
Yeah, I agree with Ron Arliss, and also with you, Max. I think that'd be a nice compromise. And it folds everything in, right? So let's go with Ron.
Carolyn?
Well, I still think there's a distinction between the purpose of the whole committee and our responsibilities as members. And I would go back to Larry's original comment that we should just briefly incorporate what is in the JPA. I think that would be better.
Thank you, Carolyn. Larry, back to you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, in retrospect, whether Ron's comment was addition to what I said, but yeah, I would still agree with Carolyn. I mean, we exist because of that one statement that was created in the enabling legislation. So that should appear somewhere near the top.
And that is this Stephen is saying, yeah, and that it really it feels right. I'm no attorney, but just as a member of the public, it brings consistency and uniformity, and that's always a good thing. So, Max, it's back to you.
Great. I would invite Lucy or Pat or Rebecca, who are the other members of the subcommittee. Is that okay with you if we add in the enabling legislation? It seems like there's at least 4 or 5 folks who seem to think that's a good idea, and then we'll also incorporate Ron's suggestion as well.
Stephen, and then Lucy.
Yeah, I suggest that you all go back into committee after this. So just take the comments that we've said, unless you have some, unless you want to take a straw vote.
If I may say this, based on the comments we're getting here, we're not getting anyone saying, well, no, wait, let's leave it. So I think we're getting passive direction that no one is really opposing this, if I may say.
Pat or Rebecca or Lucy, do you?
Pat, please.
Just a tiny little bit of historical reference that Lucy, Rebecca, Stephen can probably back me up on. The words in the enabling legislation are fairly limited. And while all these conversations were happening, we were told, oh, this can all be taken care of in the bylaws. And I think that's what we're doing in the members' responsibilities section, that there was more in the discussions than ended up in the enabling legislation, which of necessity had to be brief. And I guess I personally like the very brief statement because it says it all. Sometimes brevity says more than a whole lot of words do, because the words can be limiting when you put a lot of words, but I have no strong objection to putting the enabling legislation words in there.
Thank you, Pat. With that, Max, I'll come back to you. Do you feel you have enough direction from the board at this
I
point?
think we have enough direction, and I think that by referencing Article 4 on top of including the enabling legislation, I think we're making it clear that we're not saying we're just limited to that, right? We're saying, here's our purposes identified in the legislation, and right, we're also defining our responsibilities, and we'll be debating in a few minutes what those responsibilities are, right? But at least we'll be referencing that. So moving on to Article 3 here, organization. Nothing was changed, no suggestions on how we're elected, because that's or appointed, because that's obvious. That's how we got here. The part here that of course will merit discussion is the term, right? How long are we serving and for how many terms? And are they consecutive or non-consecutive, et cetera. We took all the feedback. It was not unanimous. The feedback was not unanimous. So I think this will be a point where, we'll want to get a straw vote to see where people are, but this is where we landed. And I think our rationale was a couple. There were a couple of reasons we landed here. We think that, a term of 3 years makes sense because there's 9 of us, right? So it's easy to have, it's broken down by 3, right? Versus a 2-year term or a 4-year term or a 5-year term, et cetera, right? We do think that term limits are important. We had received feedback that perhaps we consider not having terms initially, and that we at a later date, maybe in a year or two, consider terms through a bylaws revision or through a standing policy that could be created. But all 4 of us felt, we strongly felt that there should be term limits, even if, the length of that term could, there's merits for different lengths and different amounts of terms you could serve. So we landed on 3 in part because 9's divisible by 3, and also because we felt term limits were important. In order to give people a little bit of runway, though, right, to not have people cut short or have to be reappointing people in a few months, right? We said that this year is basically a grace period, right? And so we're all getting up and running, and that starting next year we would be that would be the start of the next terms. And I think I'll leave it at that. I believe first questions and then the public, unless maybe I can invite Pat.
Can I add one thing that's really kind of on the next page, that one thing that we did change, and I have forgotten whose suggestion it was, but that because our major responsibility is going to be responding to the audit, we changed to having calendar year rather than fiscal years, so that a group of people who had been in, it wouldn't be a brand new 3 people at some point down the road starting off with doing the report. And by changing it to calendar year, so that the first term starts in January 2022, that gives even the people who, some may choose to have the shorter term, or some may be chosen for the shorter term. That gives them, if they have 1 year plus the ability to renew for 3 years, and they've gotten a year and a half to begin with, that it really is a much longer term than it appears when you simply say 1 year. They've already got a year and a half to start before we start counting.
Wow.
Thank you, Pat. Any other comments from members? Kingston, was that you that had your hand up? I couldn't tell.
I think first it's questions, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I thought.
Not-
Yeah, I have a quick question, and that is just, when do you think we're going to draw straws?
Well, I think that we did discuss this, and I think the ideal situation would be, and obviously it's up to all of us, and perhaps with some suggestions from Mark as an impartial body here too, right? Is that we do that at a later date, right? Closer to when the term is the term is there, and we see if anyone wants to step off, right, earlier than others, because there may be people on this committee that only want to serve a year and a half or 2 years or 3, right? And so that could be a discussion for that time.
Sure.
And some people may not know that until we've all served together for 6 months or 8 months, right?
Carolyn, please.
I might be able to put what might be a comment as a question, because maybe I'm missing something, but is there an inconsistency between saying the term shall be 3 years and then the initial term shall be 1, 2, or 3 years? I mean, it's easy to reconcile, so it's not a big deal, but that's what I noticed.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Turn to the lawyers for that.
And Lucy and then Larry. Lucy, please.
Just to address Carolyn's question, the provision states that it's just for the initial committee members. The 1, 2, or 3 activity goes on. Thereafter, the standard term will be 3 years. So it's just to get this staggered arrangement going.
Thank you very
You'd have
much.
to do something like that. So, Larry.
Larry, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, I had a question on the same thing because I wasn't sure how to interpret that. Because if I draw the 1-year term, for example, and it's a 3-year term, then at the end of my 4th year, have I served 2 terms or have I served 1 1/3, thus making me eligible for another 3 years because I haven't exceeded 2?
We thought, and of course this could be changed, but we thought that for over 4 years was enough.
Okay, but
Just also
that,
remember
the question is not about whether
Sorry.
somebody wants to, but what is how you would interpret the way it's written. To me, it's not clear whether the serving 1 year and then 3 years is 2 terms or 1 1/3 terms.
2 terms. Yeah. And I think what Lucy is saying here is the word initial, right? We're the initial group. And so we will serve less years in effect, or 2/3 of us would serve less years over the duration of 2 terms. And of course, people may not be appointed for 2 terms. People may only be appointed and then not renewed, right? It's also, I think, another key part of this is the word consecutive, right? So if you get off, right, and you're, let's say, the environmental representative or the taxpayer representative, right? And the following year, the person from your geographic area steps off, you could apply for that role, and you could come back after 1 year being off. So you don't have to wait a full 3 years before, or 6 years, as the case may be, to reapply.
Okay, yeah, so I just, maybe I'm just obsessing on something where I'm reading it funny, but if we know that the 1 year and the 2 year is actually considered a full term, then whatever 3-year term after that really is a second term.
Correct. Yeah, and if anyone has any suggestions for making that clearer, that's the intention.
Yeah.
Kingston and then Stephen.
Yeah, why not just change the first sentence to say that the standard term, and make it a term of art, shall be 3 years, and then define initial term. All right. And again, a term of art, maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, and then it makes sense. Okay.
Kingston, if I may say, this is the question portion of it.
Yeah.
We're asking questions. Your comment is.
Okay, my question is, why can't you do it my way?
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. We all feel that. That's very nice of you.
I'll shut up now. Excuse me.
Stephen.
No, mine was going to be discussion too. So.
Yeah.
And I do have 2 questions. The first question is, okay, so if you're saying you can step off and then come back on a year, why isn't it in there? It needs to say that. If you're off for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, you can step back on. I think you need to have that somewhere if we do go with this language. And my second question is, have you thought about asking for volunteers? Because perhaps there's people amongst here who don't want to serve 6 years. And so you may not have to do straw polls. And perhaps you should also poll to see those, which include myself, who do want to serve a long period. And so my question is, have you discussed that as well, going that route, looking for volunteers? Lucy?
Actually, we did change the language from the previous version to include, not only will we be doing a random selection process, drawing straws, but additionally, initial committee members may volunteer for a shorter term. So that anyone who just says, I want only 1 a year, that solves that problem. Then there are only 2 other people that will be picking for a 1-year term. So that we put that in.
Good, thank you, thank you.
And Larry, to answer your second question, or maybe it was your first,
My first.
the top of the page here that says no member shall be eligible to serve for more than 2 consecutive terms. So, we felt that the word consecutive is it allows for people to serve non-consecutive terms, so that would allow them to come back after a grace period.
Which wasn't really my question. My question is more along the lines of, let's say a member in the future that has served 2 terms steps down, and then 2 or 3 years later, or 1 year later, for whatever reason, whomever they're representing would like to have that member back on. How does that work? If you step off for a year, are you then eligible to serve 2 more terms? If it's going to be terms.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So my question is, and I think my comment is that has to be clear within this, I believe. It shouldn't just be assumed, well, you step off, then you can step back on.
It seems clear to me when you say consecutive terms. I mean, we can spell it out in more words, but if you say 2 consecutive terms, then the implication is if they're non-consecutive, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen, please.
Would it be appropriate in this section to have anything about how to select or solicit applications for either replacement or filling vacant seats?
I don't think so, because we were trying to make things as broad as possible. And so that if things that don't have to be in the bylaws are important, we can still, follow up with standing rules or policies and procedures. One thing that we had just out of the 4 of us, just an idea, was maybe having a standing rules committee or procedures and policies committee that could be talking about any number of policies we might arise at, right? But if it doesn't have to be included in the bylaws, we did include it, was our general principle. But that's a good idea.
Very good. Any more comments? And if none, we'll take it to the public. And we've got 2 hands. And Bruce Bartel, please unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. The previous draft of the bylaws dated 12/21/20 suggested each initial term shall commence as of July 1st, 2021. The last version submitted now says shall commence as of January 1st, 2022. I was kind of hoping that was a typo rather than a would-be term extension. Initial term is really long under this scenario. And Pat explained she wanted to do that under a calendar year rather than a fiscal year. But I still think that looks like a very long initial application or an initial term. And it's all confusing enough. It seems like the first 3-year person who renews could be on the committee for 7.5 years. My math may be off on that, or the interpretation of how that would work. But as a brand new committee, that seems a little bit excessive.
I'm happy to respond, but I don't know with the Brown Act if we have to wait till the end.
Well, yeah, we don't really respond to public comment. Bruce, but thank you very much. I mean, even if we don't respond, we certainly respect your opinion very much. And at this point, it's Ron Arliss. Ron, please.
Yeah, first of all, I understand the math 3 divided into 9 makes 3. But as a follow-up to what Bruce was saying, there are two things I think you need to consider. Number one, when did the MWPA actually start? I think it was July 1, 2020. And so there's a 10-year finite time frame on this whole thing. If you have somebody serving 7.5 of the 10 years, I mean, I'm pretty confident that this will be renewed, but there are no guarantees in life, okay? That makes it very difficult to see any movement amongst at least 3 of the members by giving everybody, in essence, an extra 1.5 years of, you know, hey, this doesn't count. You get a 1.5 years. I think you have a problem with just a long period of time of at least 3, possibly 4 members. So, you know, like Bruce said, you might want to think about if you want to keep that January calendar date, cutting down the initial terms by 6 months, only because the more people you get on this committee over the 10-year period, the greater the ability to go out in the community and advocate for renewal of this. But when you have a small coterie of people constantly being renewed and in, it's not what the citizens' oversight should be. So I say there, so basically my 2 points are, number one.
Excuse me, Ron, you're gonna have to wrap up. We're right at the 3 minutes.
Okay, rethink the January 1, 2022 timeframe, get it to a little closer in less time, and think about how are you going to deal with somebody 7.5 years down line with a 10-year timeframe for all this. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ron. I actually don't think it's 18 months. It's 1 year extension, not an 18-month extension. And Bruce Bartel has a question, a Brown Act question that he typed, and I would turn to Mark or Larry on this particular question.
It says Brown Act limitation on discussion of public comment is for items not on the agenda. Yes, question mark. And just to hope I'm understanding Bruce's question appropriately, and I think it has to do with committee feedback to the a question from the public. And it's often encouraged within a Brown Act meeting that the committee does not engage into a back and forth question and answer period, whether it is an agenda item or an open item. So receiving the input from the public and potentially considering it during deliberation is appropriate, but there is no obligation for an answer.
Mark, thank you so much. Max, please.
Sure. I'll just say on that point, the city of Mill Valley has had this discussion over the last year and has actually changed their policies where they do now respond to public comment, but they respond after all of the public comment has gone, and then they go around and each person on the council, if they wish, gets to respond. The people don't get to call back to have a dialogue, but there's a chance for people to respond, which I think is a good way to do things. But I think that there may have been some confusion, and I apologize if it was how I explained it. The maximum term that anyone will serve under these bylaws is 6 years. Two terms for 6 years, right? So some people's will have less than 6-year terms. Their initial term, right, will be a single year, and their term won't start until January 1st, 2022. So in that case, because we all started in December of 2020, right, everyone will have, in that third of the group, they will have served a year and a month prior to their 1-year term, right? So they will have served 2 years and 1 month, and then they will start, their next, their second and last term. So they will serve a total of 5 years and 1 month, right? Whereas others will be serving. Oh, you're right. Okay, so that's true. A third will serve 7 years and 1 month. Okay.
Sometimes we have to talk
Max,
through it,
that was
right?
very good. That was really good, Max. We like the way you did that.
Wait a second.
Well, okay, so a third of us will have served will have served more in that instance. You're right.
Assuming people stay that long, of course. Larry, please,
Right.
your hand is up.
We're in a discussion period now, correct?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. Even after Max talked that out, I'm still not sure where the math is. But if our first term starts January 1st, 2021, I think we're all okay.
Yeah, but it says 2022.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask a question about. You know, if we started January 1, 2022, it means that everybody gets a free 13 months, and that's where people are coming up with the 7 years.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why we can't start our first term January 1, 2021.
I personally am more than fine with that and would actually prefer it. I think we were trying to find a compromise with Larry Minicky's suggestion that there not be terms for an initial period, and so we were trying to split the difference there, which is how we came up with this.
Pat, please.
So, my memory of the discussions that we had on this and this lengthening of term didn't come about because we wanted to give people a longer term. It came about because we felt that because of our primary duty being responding to the audit, which would happen on a fiscal year, then we ought to be on a calendar year. If you start with 2021 and presuming that the person who draws the short straws term isn't renewed, then they will serve 1 year. We're all making the assumption that everyone's term will be renewed. And I would rather make the assumption that, as Ron Arlis suggested, more people get an opportunity to serve on this. So I would vote with sticking with 2022, but with the understanding that it would be an unusual circumstance if somebody's term is going to be renewed rather than the expected everyone's term is going to be renewed, because I would agree with Ron that that doesn't give a lot of people a chance to serve on the Oversight Committee.
Good. Larry and then Carolyn.
If we start 2022, it gives people fewer opportunities to serve.
Sorry, can you say that again, Larry?
If we start January 2022, it gives fewer people the opportunity to serve.
Yeah.
Well, it gives the same number of people the opportunity to serve. It gives 3 people the opportunity to serve a term beginning 2023. If we start with this year, then it gives 3 people the opportunity to serve beginning 2022. So it's not fewer people. I guess it's fewer people over 10 years by 3.
Well, you'd have fewer people if you use if someone draws a 3-year term and we start 2021, there'll be 4 cycles because you have the first 3 cycles and then the 10th year. But if you wait until 2022 as the first term for those 3-year terms, then there's only 3 terms in that remaining 9 years.
I'm good with it either way. I'm just explaining what our reasoning was.
Yeah, well, if you want to achieve the greatest participation, then January 2021 should be the start date.
Carolyn, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Pat's point and to say, I don't think we can assume one way or the other whether any of us wants to stay on for, past the current term or go for a second term. It's going to vary by person. So, I don't think we can really address that in the bylaws.
No.
And yeah, So I do support the earlier start date. It just is logical. That's when we in fact started. So, makes sense to me.
Maybe we can have Max do his arithmetic again and help figure this out.
I went to a Waldorf school and we didn't do much math, so I haven't done math since high school.
Me neither. I didn't go to a Waldorf school.
So no, but I think there's consensus around.
Well, I would like to, I haven't had a chance to comment. And I'd like to kind of give my perspective on why I'm suggesting what I suggested, which is that we look at terms 2 or 3 years down the line for the simple reason that we're going to have attrition. And all these questions we're talking about right now may not even need to come into play. And it doesn't really change anything. What it does is in terms of whether we have terms or not, it just times it differently. And I'll explain one of my concerns is probably in about 5 years from now or less, there's going to have to be starting discussions about a new Measure C. And this committee, whomever is on it, is going to play a pretty key role at somehow on that next measure. Whenever the board decides the timing of this measure should go before the public and such. And my feeling from the beginning has been that having people with continuity and experience will be especially valuable to the MWPA and to the promotion of the next tax measure. So if we have a whole bunch of completely new faces here with less experience, it may not be as helpful. That's where I've been coming from and why I suggested put terms to the side for now, come back to it in 24 or 36 months. Let's see what our membership looks like. And things may work themselves out really easily at that point. And with that, Max, I'll go back to you unless there's any other comments.
Sure. Well, prior to Larry's comments, I was going to say that there seemed to be consensus on 3-year terms. So I was going to suggest we move on. I guess I'll ask the question is, having heard what Larry suggested, do others feel similarly, or do you agree that 3-year terms makes sense and that we incorporate them either this year or next?
Larry, please.
I think we should also get a consensus on which next year, this year or next also.
Well, I think the bigger question is whether we're having terms at all.
Yeah, so there's 2 questions here.
Yeah,
You need to have addressed when you go back.
Having heard the comments, I would agree. I'm happy with us starting at January 1st, 2021. Keep in mind that it does say January 1st, right? And we obviously aren't meeting on January 1st. So that means that we would actually select the new leadership at the December meeting, right? Or whatever meeting was prior. So just keep that in mind. So, this coming, year, for example, and we would carry on from that. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think the bigger question is whether or not we're having terms at all.
Well, my suggestion is not to have terms. My suggestion is timing on bringing terms in. That is actually what I'm saying. That is actually what I'm talking
about. Practically speaking, right, if we were going to revisit it, I guess we would just put a line saying we'll revisit terms at in 36 months.
Right. That was particularly my suggestion. Stephen, it looks like you have your hand raised. Am I correct? Oh, well, your hand is up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
How do I turn, it's off, I think. Okay.
Okay, very good. From here, any more questions? Lucy, please, or comments, I should say, forgive me.
As far as putting it in the way it is, there's of course nothing stopping us as we understand how things unfold, as we understand our selection and replacement processes, as we move through, that we can amend our bylaws. It's traditional that bylaws actually, particularly for membership as opposed to appointed people, as opposed to elected people, have terms, and the processes by which they serve are generally laid out in the bylaws, but that can always be changed. So my suggestion is maybe change the term to starting January 21, leave it as it is, and then as we understand how things progress and how things work, we can make changes as needed.
Rebecca.
I agree with Lucy's approach and a slightly different reason. I think it's important to think about the perception that the bylaws give to the public. I think having no comment about terms would not be good. I think delaying having a discussion about them, again, throws a skewed view, I think, to the public. I think we should just come right out and say, for right now, or we don't have to say it that way, but we've discussed it. We want 3 years. Here's how it's going to look. That's clear to them. And it leaves, I think, a better impression of how we're going to be working, more transparency.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, let me suggest this, because we don't really have bylaws, and my feeling is these first few months, really, we're only trying to we're not doing the regular work. We're just trying to be foundational here, and perhaps for this year, for this particular, the terms will start. First, we got to get the bylaws passed, but have the terms start with the fiscal year for the first go round. And then shift to either year end, or I suggested, this is actually a discussion with Mark, that give us about 3 or 4 months before we change around to audit, basically, to review the fiscal year after the financials come out. Mark, please. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I had dogs barking. So, and I wanted to follow up with some of the reasoning I had with a October date as a suggestion to Larry Minikis when we were having a conversation. Was we have the board of directors on a fiscal, we have the operations on a annual. And for just kind of not have this big mass transition at the same time, I was thinking an October date for COC could make sense.
Lucy, and then Larry.
Okay, so mine is just a practical question, not having sat in this capacity before. The fiscal year will be finished. The matters will go to the auditors. We still are waiting at that point for the auditor's report to come out. And I have no idea how long that takes. And then at that point, we're going to do our review and write a report. And who knows how long that will take. So the thought was that if we're on the calendar year, and maybe this is not right, that if the fiscal year will have ended in June, and then we will have done whatever business we had in terms of writing the report by December. We don't know whether that's a reasonable amount of time or not.
Larry, thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, I'll just tag on to Lucy because that's what I was going to comment on. You're really looking at probably, it'd be really aggressive to go and have an auditor complete something in 6 weeks if you started it the first week of July.
Oh.
So, even a small agency would typically take about 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks. So you might get something back in 2 months, but probably into the end of the third quarter. So unless we can get all our reports done by the end of October, the October time frame might also not be adequate time. What's your sense on that, Mark?
No, I probably had higher expectations for how fast the auditors would come through, and you're probably being more pragmatic and realistic than me.
Well, I think in the first year for the MWPA, though, it could probably go pretty fast because they don't have that much to audit. You don't even have revenue until this last tax cycle.
Yeah, my suggestion though for the bylaws is even though that they are amendable, I would suggest a focus on the long term rather than, hey, we're in our first year.
So if you're looking at long-term, all agencies, government agencies typically end June 30th, which means you're also competing for their time. It would depend on which auditor you use, how big their staff is, and if you got enough leverage to get in on the front end or possibly have them do it at the same time as one of our member fire agencies.
Yeah, we're using the same auditor, Southern Wind Fire, and I can't remember the firm off the top of my head. It is a firm that many public agencies use. And so I think your timeline is probably more realistic than what I was talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Larry, your experience is always invaluable. Pat, you had your hand up, or?
Just a slight comment. And again, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, but it seems to me, Larry, when you were talking about not addressing this issue initially, that in some ways, that's what the 2022 January 1st was intended to address, that this year when we're all doing the startup kind of thing doesn't really count. And then it would starting, and it's unfortunate that it sounded really good with it being July the 1st. It does make it seem longer, but it seems to me that accomplishes the same thing of giving people a little bit longer in this startup phase before we get to our actual work. Because I don't want to see 3 of these faces disappear come next January. And that's what it would mean if for the 3 people who draw the short straw, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Yeah, and a concern of mine has been for the public's benefit and for the MWPA's benefit is having some continuity here at the beginning, that having the people that are, us who are helping to form this thing, be there for a bit is really just helpful to the public. Experience means a lot, and going through what we're going, all the pain we're going through right now and the twists and turns, not that I should say pain, but the twists and turns of trying to get this out. It's just invaluable to us moving forward. I mean, we're shaping this thing. So Larry, please, and then Carolyn.
Yeah, if anyone's going to leave after the first year, no matter where you set that start date, they're going to leave. If their own personal circumstances are such that they can only serve through the end of this year, they're going to resign their position. Mm-hmm. So unless they get voted off the island by the board members because they've done a bad job, you're going to get your term renewed. So to me, the continuity issue in that initial phase doesn't concern me as much.
Oh, thank you, Larry. Thank you. Did I see another hand? Carolyn, please.
Well, I just wanted to say that to me, I think our work in this first year is important work. And, I, for one, would like to get credit for it. We're writing the bylaws, we're standing the committee up. We're going to be breaking new ground, it's a new group. So, yeah, I don't really agree with the concept of putting it off for our real work. I think this is work too, so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Carolyn. Any other comments at this point? Seeing none. Max, I guess I'll bring it back to you at this point.
Sure. So I think we have, a couple of options here. That said, it seemed I like Mark's suggestion of October, but hearing Larry's reference to the auditor, it seems like that's not just workable, practically speaking. So assuming that we have consensus for January, I think the discussion is whether or not
it's something in January 1st, 2021 or 2022. I've actually come around to 2021. I thought that the public comments were persuasive, looking out, 7-8 years. I also thought, Larry Minickies, that your comment was well taken about switching things out after just 5 or 6 years. And I actually think that, switching it out after 7 or 8 is even more burdensome, right? If we switch after 4, 5, or 6, right, we'll have time for some new folks to come in for that latter half when there will be campaigns and will be, the COC won't be doing campaigns as an entity, but, looking at being responsive to the public on what our opinion is of the various, reports we've done. So I'm not too concerned that people will be removed who don't want to, because I'm sure after 1 year, everyone will be reappointed. We can make our voice clear, I think, to the board, right, when we go for appointment, that our hope is that people give us, maybe unless there's some egregious reason someone's not showing up or isn't doing work or something like that. But everyone on this committee is doing the work and showing up. So I don't think that's going to be any issue, and I'm sure everyone's going to be appointed. So 4 years minimum, I would imagine.
Larry, please.
Would
Thank
it
you.
make people more comfortable rather than a 1, 2, and 3 year initial term for it to be 2, 3, and 4?
Well, that's what the 2022 date. That's the equivalent of the 2022 date.
Yeah, but that first 4-year cycle would be effectively a 1-year term. But at least you know
Correct.
that person is guaranteed 4 years.
Oh, I see.
So it accomplishes the same thing, but what you're doing is you're guaranteeing whoever draws a 1-year straw that they will serve 4 years.
That they don't have to get reappointed.
That's correct.
Oh,
But they're only serving 4 years unless until there's, they fulfill that non-consecutive gap.
I'm open to that.
it sounds reasonable. It sounds reasonable.
Yeah, clever solution. Thanks.
Lucy, please.
So just to clarify, we're talking about starting a term January 1st, 2021, but then changing the terms to 2, 3, and 4 instead of 1, 2, and 3. Is that right?
And thereafter, they would be 3 years terms.
Oh, yeah. So we've got the standard term. We're just talking about
The initial term, correct.
Yeah. So is that what
Larry, you're on mute, Larry.
Sorry, the 4-year term is only a 1-term appointment.
So you're not 7 years. You're 4 years. You're not 4 plus a 3.
Okay. So the person who draws a 4-year term would only be able to serve once, and everyone else would get a double to a consecutive term, assuming they're eligible. That gets that's complicated. But yes, draftable. So we should do that.
And what happens here, right, is in 2 years, there'll be a bylaws revision and people will remove that portion because it'll no longer be applicable, right? So I think it's okay if it's a little complicated at the beginning, right? Because we'll go back and clean it up once the initial stuff's no longer relevant.
Yeah. See, we're not that far apart. I was just trying to push that to the side so we could talk about it a little further down the road. That's all I was trying to do here, because I thought I still do think it's going to work itself out anyway, one way or the other.
Great. Well,
And I may be wrong. We may all be here in 4 years still. God bless us. So I think we're ready to move on to the next item, right? Okay. And who is it? Pat?
Lucy for Article 4 and then Pat.
Okay, Lucy.
And then Rebecca.
Oh, sorry, and then Rebecca. Yes.
So as we've discussed already, that by reducing the purpose discussion in our beginning, we then refined and thought through some of the issues and put them in the members responsibilities section, which we can go through. I mean, item by item. One is to attend committee meetings, and I doubt that's controversial. To serve on subcommittees of the committee, which is probably not a problem. Now we come to number 3, which maybe needs a little more explanation. It's to serve as a representative or alternate at meetings of the MWPA's Board of Directors, Operations Committee, Advisory Technical Committee, partnership entities, because we haven't really discussed that, but need to think it through, and each of these bodies' subcommittees as assigned. We're not having everybody sit on everything. And then participate in a voiced but non-voting capacity to identify issues relating to expenditures and work plans. Now that is the way we thought it would be the most accurate representation of what we see as the participatory portion of our work. That we're there on the ground, that we're there as part of the conversation when issues relating to the expenditure of the money comes up, and we have somebody in, and the alternative, we were thinking, and maybe I jumped ahead on this, but what we were thinking, instead of having a standing committee that monitors the Board of Directors, that monitors the Operations Committee, we actually have delegates and an alternate. And that way, that person becomes the participant in that meeting. They come back to the full COC and they say, the Operations Committee is thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. Does that raise any issues for us about this? We discuss it. We come to some consensus, and then that person is sent back as the delegate to the Operations Committee and to say that the COC has concerns about this on the following grounds. This seems to me a sort of an easier way of focusing and participating than, first of all, having a rotating group from a subcommittee. So you have somebody who's integrated. And you also have the full committee's input when that person speaks. So they're not being the spokesperson for the COC, they're speaking as to what the COC has thought about and determined. So this was, it's a novel approach. It's not, it gives us one method of participating that none of us have tried before. And I think it's really is experimental. We could discover that this is unworkable on a number of grounds. And I think that the Board of Directors has some concerns that having somebody sitting in on a committee, they could be there chatting away, wasting time, objecting to things that are really beyond their sphere of influence. They want to know how we would participate. And that's why the language in here talks about to identify issues relating to expenditures and work plans. So that would give the focus of our participation and give us, plus I might add, the idea was that we would develop for ourselves a code of conduct so that, and part of that would address how you participate in other committee meetings. So you don't spend 45 minutes talking about your cat. You actually have a responsibility to raise certain issues in a sort of reasonable, clear, polite way, and then, take things under advisement and report back. So, and that would be the next step of what I saw us doing is developing a code of conduct, and also working on our policies and procedures, because those would be the two things that govern how we perform in that capacity. So, any thoughts?
Thoughts, input? Larry, please.
I guess one of the things, and it's probably not time for an answer now because you said that it requires some additional thought, is how a person will represent the committee. Because you're going into a committee meeting of the board or subcommittee of the board on a topic that we haven't heard about yet, but then you as a representative of this committee is going to comment on what they're doing without having a discussion with, this committee in terms of representing, this committee. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing.
So,
Lucy.
so the idea would be that because the way things unfold is there are sort of informational sessions, and that you see there's something coming up. So, they're planning this, they're discussing this. That's an opportunity for the delegate to come back to the COC and say, what do we think about that? Do you see a problem here or there? The COC determines its own position, at which point the delegate comes back when there's, before it's been voted on, to raise the issue and say the COC has concerns. And that would be, it would be a slow process. You're not there. I don't know that you'd be raising objections at every point, but you would be gathering thoughts, taking them back, and then bringing back the COC position on that.
Question for Mark then. From a process standpoint, at this point, I'm not sure how different that looks from just being an at-large member of the public. Because what typically would happen is that if somebody representing one of our boards or commissions were to come in with something specific, they would present as part of the agenda.
Yeah, that's a real good point. And one of the things that was running through my mind as Lucy was talking, and maybe I'm just steeped too much in chain of command, lines of authority, and as you said, Larry, process. If and I completely agree with the intent. I would prefer that the Oversight Committee is catching things early rather than be retrospective, or I'd rather it be proactive. But I think there's a solution to reach both goals, that we can be proactive as well as following process and lines of communication. And with the chain of command, lines of authority, the Citizens Oversight Committee, your entry, you work for, or you report to, I should say, the board of directors. And so your line of entry, your lines of communication is to the board of directors. Vis-a-vis, quite often will be through the executive officer, whether it's me or somebody else. And fully support observing and identifying any potential issues that are happening at the advisory technical committee level or at the operations committee level. But I don't know if it's line of communication wise appropriate for the oversight committee to insert at that level, rather than having the observation, bring it back to a committee meeting like Lucy mentioned, and go, yeah, you know what, that probably isn't the appropriate expenditure based on the way Measure C is written. And then you come together as a committee, you go, yeah, this is a concern. And then you insert at the executive officer at the board of directors level, hey, we found this concern, rather than inserting directly at the advisory technical committee or the operations committee. And also, process wise, we have varying levels of checks and balances built into the process. And the advisory technical committee may discuss something that isn't necessarily appropriate. And after they've chewed on it for a while, they may self-correct. Or once it gets to, let's say they decided that's the way we want, what we want to propose, and they don't self-correct, it goes up to the operations committee, then the operations committee has the opportunity to correct that. And then finally, the board of directors. Now, we don't want it to always have to go that long and arduous. And so that's why I recommend there's the recommendation that you do monitor the committee meetings, deliberate as a committee. We're not quite sure that's a good idea. And then bring it to myself as the executive officer or the president of the board and go, hey, we have this concern, can you monitor this? And I think that keeps the lines of communications and the chains of authority in line with what the organizational structure is designed to be. Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And I actually had almost a very similar question to Larry's, but slightly different, because I think several of us were here for when the enabling language was being written. As I recall, there wasn't really a place for the COC member to sit on any of these other committees. And it seems that the way it's written, it suggests that we're a member, an outside member of these, we sit within these committees, and I'm not even sure if that can be done. Mark, maybe you can respond to that part of it.
What I do know is that the only ad hoc member-at-large memberships that are allowed per the JPA language is at the Advisory Technical Committee. And that would be approved by the board. The board of directors and the operation committee, and the enabling language does not have the authority to have member-at-large members.
That's what I was concerned about when I read that. Lucy, please.
I would view that as where if they were silent on it, if there's unless there's a prohibition, the particular role of the COC is overarching over the entire structure of the JPA, that our participation at every level is useful. Obviously, we need to be very careful we're not a nuisance, but that that being voiced but non-voting is a legitimate exercise of our watchdog role. And once again, this shows these overall review of the agency and its work. And this is the gist of what we were contemplating from very early days as to the role of the Citizens Oversight Committee. It was considered to be its watchdog. It was not to be retroactive, and that these were the points that were being made when the language was being drafted, and the understanding was that we write our own bylaws to give ourselves the role that we need to play. So if the language is silent, unless it specifically prohibits an at-large member, though I wouldn't call us at-large, I would a participant, but it's a category. But unless it prohibits it, I would say that there is room for us to be there. And so I don't know whether as I say, it's unusual. This is a new model of citizens oversight that I don't think it's been tried before, but this is a new agency. So in that way, we're all beginning, we're all thinking.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Max, you would like to comment, please.
Are we still in questions or yeah, okay, I'll save mine for deliberation then.
Very good. Any more questions at this point? Seeing none, Lucy, would you like to?
Can I just, Larry?
Please, Carolyn.
Yeah,
Yes, of
sorry.
course.
I'm unclear on what this partnership entities refers to. Could you explain?
Yes, I would, because the partnership entities, the only one that exists right now is ESP, but there might be others, because they are having significant input into the thinking and the programming of the agency. We thought it would be helpful to have COC members, and probably some of our COC members are automatically sitting in on at least the ESP version, to know that this is coming from that direction, that this is the thinking in this area or that. It gives us a better picture of the overall issues in the agency. So that's what it was addressing. I did, it could be in or it could be out, but that was the thinking.
Lucy, if I could correct one thing, ESP does not have significant input into the operations. That's not the purpose of ESP. So we'll get there. I'm not going to try and define it this evening, but I just wanted to correct that. That's not what's happening at all. It's not giving all this input. It's investigative.
I thought it was defining best practices or coming up, working on that. Is that?
I think we should, instead of getting deeply into that, save that for our general meeting, because it's going to be on the agenda actually at the end of the month.
So in that sense, is everybody saying no to the partnership entities? Does that make, we should not be making that part of our purview? Would that make sense to you, all of you? Is that?
It does make sense to me, yeah.
I think well, this is deliberation, but I would like
Yeah.
to deliberate on it, but I'll hold my, I haven't.
Let me do this. Are there any comments from the public on this particular item at this time? Oh, excuse me, before we go there, I don't see any, but Larry, please.
Yeah, I had one more question regarding, I think it's number 6, which is about approval of the audit. Mark, can you give us some clarification on that, please? Because usually approval of the audit is done as a fiduciary body. And that would have to be the board's role.
I actually had that, the word approve highlighted as well. And it seems to me that review and opine on annual audit might be something more appropriate for an oversight committee.
Right, because we're not a financial committee. It's suggesting that we're going to give final approval. That's a good point, Larry. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, there are no hands raised from the public. Give it another second here, see if anyone, no, okay. So we'll bring it back. And Max, I think you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I have 2 comments. One, when we were discussing having representatives on committees and on the board, I compared it to the student trustees that serve on high school district boards and at community colleges. I was on one when I was in high school on the Tamalpais Union High School District Board. We did have a vote, but it was purely advisory. It went into the minutes. But on all questions that weren't personnel or legal or something that was discussed in closed session, the superintendent would turn and say, "Hey, does the student trustee from TAM have something to say? Does the student trustee from Redwood, from Drake, from Tamil, San Andreas, etc." So I think it is done elsewhere. There's other examples I've thought of. I know that the Marin Housing Authority is the Board of Supervisors plus 2 residents who are representing kind of the public housing community. So I think there are bodies out there that have people who sit in, might have an advisory vote, or may just be there to just listen, observe, and maybe occasionally ask a question. I did want to just bring up on the partnership entities. I just maybe a question for Mark or anyone who might have an answer. ESP has been around even predating Measure C coming into effect, but I just wonder if we've defined partnerships somewhere, and if so, if there's kind of limitations on the role that they have, because it's kind of beyond ESP, right? There could be 15 different partnerships, and they could span a range of having incredible influence to having no influence at all. And so if it's going to have influence, true influence on the operations, then I think we should have a role there. And if it doesn't, right, then we shouldn't. And so I think Larry's point was well taken, but it was in regard specifically to ESP, and I just don't want us to miss the possibility of future partnership entities.
And if I may answer real quick, Max, the short answer is no, partnerships have not been defined. It's been discussed amongst the board, and we know that is an agenda item that we need to address, the board needs to address. However, we wanted to get through our staff retreat or board retreat in January, and then find the appropriate time to enter into the deliberations to define partnership.
Thank you, Mark. And Carolyn, I'm so surprised you are not talking about Fern in this discussion, because that's another organization that's deeply committed to what's going on here. they're very involved. And yeah, no, I think oversight or really education or exploration into what these committees are doing is very important, so that we understand what their concerns are. Absolutely, or the work that they're doing. I think it'd be very valuable to the entire MWPA, not just to the COC. So that's my bit. Can you like to speak?
My turn?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the one that I asked to put the item on the agenda to discuss that in our next regular board meeting. And I think we should save it until then, whether in fact we have language in this particular section, partnership entities or not. I don't think we're at all precluded from looking into what the relationship is between ESP, Fern, and other entities and the MWPA, and asking that they be, if needed, formalized. Okay, so let's save the discussion for later.
No,
It's
thank
my
you.
recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. But what we're really focused on is whether we want to have the words partnership.
I'm saying I don't care. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, that's really what we're discussing at this point. Any more discussion on item? Really, we're on item number 3 there
Okay, so
of Article 4. So, Lucy, I will bring it back to you.
Have more.
Or if I may, Carolyn, before you go, if I may suggest, perhaps people would like to take like a 3 or 4 minute recess, and
Yeah, no, I'm just as soon plow on through and be sure we
Okay.
finish on time.
All right. Carolyn, did you have a comment then?
Yeah, while we were talking about how and to what extent we would actually present comments to these boards and committees that we're going to be attending, I looked at the JPA and it raised a question to me. So let's look at this carefully. After a review of the previous year's work program and financial audit, the COC will adopt a report describing the extent to which funds have been spent consistent with the tax measure and provide feedback to the board of directors. And to me, that raises a little question of whether our feedback and our review is retrospective, the way I read that. And, we should plan on putting our comments and our feedback. I mean, it's a free country. We can always get a hold of Mark or the board chair or whatever. But maybe we shouldn't be planning on trying to be really active participants in these meetings. We want to monitor and bring it back to our committee. But anyway, yeah, I read that language is restrictive a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Carolyn. Lucy, please.
So once again, I make the same point that might well be a function that we would definitely undertake in our report that we would write, but that where the formation agreement is silent, where everything, unless something is specifically stated, under no circumstances will the Citizens Oversight Committee have any commenting or participatory function. This is where our new model can take an unusual role and give us a truly proactive versus reactive help to the MWPA. It's more useful to be in early than to make a comment afterwards.
Carolyn.
Yeah, just there's some more language that's pertinent to our going to these other boards meetings, and it says we are monitoring those meetings. So that again is a little bit more like we're listening and reporting back, not so much, trying to influence what they're doing. We're just watching and reporting back. And we can always informally bring up concerns, I think.
Stephen, please. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're
Mute.
still on mute. There you
Good. Thank you.
go.
Sorry. My concern was in discussing this is to make a distinction between being a member of the public who has a right to listen in on everything and to have a 3-minute comment. Was that we were sort of regular participants and that we would participate in the discussion if it seemed appropriate. Let's say that, in fact, I have an issue that I want to mention at the end for the next meeting. But let's say that we, as people who are being the citizens watchdogs, oversight people, notice something that seems like it's getting on the edge of the authorizing legislation and Measure C, that we can bring it up and don't have to wait for the 3-minute public comment, particularly if it's passed. So not necessarily to be a member of the deliberation or anything, but if we think there's something worth paying attention to do it then, rather than coming back to our committee and sending it to the executive committee, to the board of directors, and then that way. My sense is that we can be far more useful. We're not experts at fighting fires. There are plenty of people doing that. We're not experts at public works and roads and communication stuff, although some of us know a bunch about communications. So in any case, what I think we can be most useful as is being able to ask a question or make a comment at a point where it becomes an ingredient in the committee's deliberations. That was my thought.
Yeah, Larry, please. Thank you, Steve.
I was going to say, I agree with the proactive element, because what we don't want to do is wait until our reporting cycle to find something where then we have to report on it. We report on it in a negative way, and then it looks bad to the public, because we want this agency to succeed. So to the extent that things are identified early, you take corrective action and then move on. I think what we're struggling with here is finding a sweet spot in terms of how we can be part of that discussion without interfering in the discussion. I'm still thinking about that.
Yeah.
In terms of language.
Thank you, Larry. And I can make one suggestion here that Mark can take back to the board. Is MMWD used to do this. They haven't done it recently, but or it may have actually been the Board of Supervisors, that if you represent an organization, instead of giving 3 minutes, you were given 4 or 5 minutes as the organization. And perhaps there could be some language from the Board of Directors that allows us to Stephen's comment, to speak beyond the 3 minutes. Now, what you're looking for is you're looking to inject in between, like we're doing here with all of us. And the language may not allow us, because I'm not an attorney. I always say this, but I remember it was very, very specific as to who the members would be of each one of these. We went over and over this until it was drilled into us back then as to how this was going to all be structured. So I understand what Lucy's saying, certainly, and the board may agree with her on this. But I'm just offering an alternate, which is any one of we ask the board as a member of the COC, if we speak, may we speak for a longer period, as a minimum. Let me put it that way. Kingston, please.
Yeah, just a comment. If I were sitting on the MWPA board of directors and took this language, which they have to approve, I wouldn't like it very much. I mean, now I have essentially an ex officio member of my board that I didn't have before. And it's a practical comment. I mean, they're not going to like it, and they may have to discuss it, but I'm not sure it's going to work. So.
Thank you, Kingston. And that has actually been in the back of my mind. What will the board and the executive committee approve? They're not going to approve everything, our entire wish list. So I want to make sure that when we send something up there, that it's expeditious, that they're going to look at it, not deliberate over it tremendously, throw it back at us, and we're September before we get this done. So that's my concern, really. That's Max, please, let me go to you.
I was just going to say, I think that's a good suggestion to maybe try to come up with a compromise, having more than the 3 minutes. But I think, our intention was imagining it'd be less about commenting and more about asking questions, right? Because I think, I don't know that our committee is going to have a lot of opinions always, right? I think we're going to have questions more than we have opinions. And as individuals, we'll have opinions, right? But I don't know that it's my role to bring my own personal opinions and say they're the COCs, right? When I show up at the operations committee, right? And they're probably not something related to what the COC's mission is, right? It's probably something about, hey, did you consider this or that, related to the actual, substance of what they're talking about. And so I think it was more, the intention was about asking questions, gathering information, and bringing it back so that the COC could then deliberate. And if we wanted to make a comment, maybe we would write a letter, right? But we wouldn't necessarily be showing up at every meeting and opining on every item.
Right. And the option they may say to us, look, if you have questions, put them in writing to us and we'll respond to you in full. I mean, they may just say that to us. We understand what you'd like to do, but this is what we're going to suggest. Lucy, please, back to you.
So, and I think Max's point is getting exactly to the concerns that we had, which was that unless you're a participant in the conversation, you really can't say, do you mean this? And am I misunderstanding that? And that gives you, and then if you don't have the right to be part of the conversation, to be at the table, you then go back, you write your letter, you say, and the answer is, first of all, time has gone past. The moment of clarification is missed. And time has been wasted and effort has been put in on when the answer could have quite been simply, no, you've got that wrong, it's this. And that would have been a very simple way of just dealing with that concern. So, it seems to me it's the most flexible and least burdensome option to have somebody there participating in an appropriate manner and on appropriate topics, just to get our understanding clear, or if we have something to say that might be, just a warning that we think this might be on the edge of this problem here. That's all. That's useful. That's actually going to help. And it doesn't seem to me that we would be obstructive or difficult to deal with. It would just be a voice at the table, a question.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, I think we'll have to bring it back to Mark for, he'll have to come back to us
Not ready yet.
with this particular one, I believe.
I don't know if it's me, Larry, or if it's after, I've given you my thoughts and my idea about lines of communication and chains of command, but it would be up to your committee to come up with your suggestion based on my input. And then it really is pushed up to the board, like what Kingston was saying, would be fully up to them. And then a quick point of order. I see that Bruce Bartell rose his hand. It is after the normal question and answer, but I think the way that this committee has presented itself, it's open to comment, even if it's a little bit out of sequence.
I was going to thank you, Mark. I was going to bring exactly that up.
Okay.
Bruce, please, let's go to you. Sorry for holding you for so long.
No problem. I understand this is a little bit of a variation. One thing that this section does do is emphasize that COC does have access to subcommittee meetings, which are currently not being recorded or available for public inspection. I would hope that the COC would have access to all subcommittee meetings of the board. And this section in the COC bylaws would emphasize to the board that this is essential. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We appreciate that. Bringing it back to the board, to the committee, is there any more comments on this item? Lucy, I think I will bring it back to you at this point. I don't know that we're settled on this. Really, and not sure where we should take it from here, except maybe deliberate a little bit more. I did like Mark's suggestion.
I think we could
And-
take a straw vote and just, or just kind of go around and see
Right.
what we're feeling.
But I also see, I wanted to say, and I also see Kingston, I also agree with Kingston's point that when the board sees this, they're going to go, wait, where is this coming from? We'll see. I mean, we'll see. You've got a lot of members up there. Some may really like it. We'll see.
Yeah. I'll just say, I was not, part of the grand jury, that put together the report. I was not part of the, negotiations for it, right? But, and I'm also not an attorney, right? But we have people on our COC that were part of the negotiations
Mhm.
that are attorneys, like Lucy, right? And who were part of the grand jury. And so I think, if we decide something, we shouldn't be worried about, oh, the MWPA board is going to think this or that, right? We're going to put it forward. We're going to put forth the best people from our COC to argue the point, and it shouldn't be an argument, right? But to explain, to answer questions, to say how it's workable, to say how it works with their bylaws. And then if they say, yeah, no, actually, we disagree, then great. Then we come back and we, make the changes and move forward and continue on in a different direction. I could go either way in on this question personally, but I don't think we should be worried about what they're going to do. I think we put forward what we want, and then if we adjust, we adjust.
I think they have to come into play, because if we're just putting language down there that is likely to be, and I'm not talking about this language, I'm talking about any language that's likely to be rejected, then why are we even doing that? It's an exercise. It's
Well,
just,
we don't know that, right? I mean, there's multiple people on our committee who were part of the grand jury, that were part of the negotiations, who are saying, actually, this was, the intention, right? So.
okay, well, very good. Larry, please. Thank you, Max, again.
I would just say that it seems like everybody likes having this in there. So I would agree with Max. We just submit it, and if they reject it, we have to rewrite it. But if they just say no, we need to find out also what they're willing to live with.
Right.
Even if it just means having a discussion where we invite Bruce to the one of our meetings, representing the board, because we don't want to keep going back and forth on this. So
Correct. Right.
hopefully, Mark, if they do reject whatever we submit to them, that part of the direction that you can ask for is also, what they're willing to let the COC do.
And I think Max inferred this. It would be my recommendation that it wouldn't just be me that presents the bylaws to the board of directors, that a representative from the COC would be the person presenting to the board. And that would give you that direct feedback without being through me or watching the video, so on and so forth.
Very good. Very good.
Of course.
Good. Carolyn.
Did you say we were going to have a straw vote on this number 3? I mean, my remaining objection is I really don't think we should include the partnership entities. I mean, ESP is open to the public. Anybody can come. And so, people came this week. I saw several of you there. So, and Fern is not really, we don't have a formal, we're not recognized in the JPA or anything like that. And we're kind of, we're representatives of other groups. We have a distinct purpose. I really don't think it's appropriate to put Fern in there. And I just don't see, any need to do it. I think we can stick with the committees that are here. They're mentioned in the JPA, and we're good. And, if down the road we find a need to broaden it, and there is some partnership that we think, or some other new committee that we think we should monitor, we can add it. But I would prefer to see that taken out. If we're voting, that's all I wanted to say.
Yes, Carolyn, thank you so much. And Stephen wants to, please. You're on,
You're muted.
you're muting yourself. Come on.
I know. There's some background noises around him trying to protect you all from. But I think Carolyn's got a good point. The ESP meetings are open to anybody to participate in the discussions. So in a sense, we don't need to require it. So in a sense, the way they've structured their meetings, it accomplishes everything that this wording was aiming at.
Okay. And I'm watching Kingston, and he's having a little. We're gonna have. Now, let me explain.
I don't mind removing the language, but I simply, I believe that the relationship between Fern and ESP and MWP and any other of the environmental groups is a fundamental, all right, issue that has to be addressed by the COC. We have to understand how these groups are interacting, all right, how to get access to all their records to make sure that in the future, all right, they are going to have videos that we can look at, all right, from their meetings. So because if they're interrelating with the MWPA, we want to know how that works. And we also want to know if there's ever going to be a formal relationship between any of the groups and the MWPA. And we can discuss this later. And as I said, remove the language now, but it's coming up in our next regular meeting because I've asked for it to be there. Okay. I think it's important.
Right. No, well, Kingston has some very good points. So let me divorce myself from that committee completely. And the reason you want oversight on something like this is you want to make sure that there's no self-dealing with these committees. Are people in there for the wrong reasons? Is this thing doing something? So I can absolutely understand where Kingston's coming from, 100%. If it's connected to the MWPA, and I wasn't part of ESP, I'd want to know what's going on. I really would. And I told him in his email, I totally respect what he's asking for. So
we can
remove it now, or we can put it in later. I'm agnostic on that. It's neither here nor there with me.
I'll just clarify that I think when we did put it in, we were not referring to Fern. I think Fern is an outside, I don't know, I'll let Carolyn define it, but an advocacy group or an interest group that's representing, like, there's many, right? But I think the ESP is a little different in that it's there's a formal aspect of it, and there may be other formal partnerships in the future. And I think just like the committees, it makes sense to have us review them. But if others disagree, then that's fine.
If you're on the website, which you are, all right, then you have a quasi whatever official relationship, all right, to MWPA. Okay,
that's correct.
Well, we just want to look at it. That's all.
Yeah,
Who does?
That makes sense.
It's very fair. It's very fair. Now let me
Yes, he does, but Fern doesn't.
No, Fern does not. But Fern also is wants a voice. They made it very clear. They want a voice here. They want to make sure that that your concerns are being heard. I mean, I heard that loud and clear.
Right. Well, we go to the board meetings. We're going to I think we're trying to go to the other committee meetings, and we speak at the meetings. So if any of us are there, you're going to know what our input is.
Right. Okay. Very good. I think that's it. Let me ask a procedural question here. We're at 2 hours. I'm wondering if we should break this into 2 sections and stop at this point, or shortly from here, or continue through. So how about a show of hands on what you'd, or please speak up on how people feel at this point.
I gotta run. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can't continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's call it adjourn. Maybe come back with other meetings.
Yeah.
Pat and Larry,
Yeah, just a suggestion that, that and I agree that I need to run too. My brain is going to start going dead in a few minutes.
And it
But
has nothing to
maybe-
do with the rest of the day, I assume.
Maybe the
Time,
the
right?
committee can get together and take the comments that we've already heard into the first part, and then we'll hash over. But if we hash over everything else, as long as it's taken us to do this, we'll be here for 4 hours.
For sure. I'll get my pillow.
Yeah.
So then, as chair, the next question will be, do you want to continue this at our meeting at the, oh, Larry, I'm sorry. Please, let me turn to you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump. You're on mute.
I muted myself already.
Yeah.
What I was going to suggest was to finish up Article 4. Because
Well, I have to run, so I can't stay.
okay, so you want to just leave it in terms of where we ended
Yeah.
Article 4. Okay.
It seems like a good point to break. It's 2 hours and such. That's why I wanted to see what the committee felt about this. So my question is, do you want to pick this up at the end of the month at a regular meeting? Would you prefer to have a special meeting at some point in the future? Please tell me how the committee.
Yeah, our regular meeting is not that far off, so I think that's fine.
Right. That was actually the purpose of doing this, is 2 weeks from the last meeting, 2 weeks to the next, and gives the subcommittee time to work. Max, please.
Yeah, I was just, before we break, I don't think we need to go through the rest of 4 after the numbers, but since we've already gone through the numbers, I think it'd be helpful for Lucy, since she took this part, to just recap, so that we make sure that the 4 of us, understand what we're going to incorporate into it, if that's okay, just so we don't have to relitigate everything that we've just discussed.
On everything on Article 4, I don't know that we're
No,
ready.
just 1 through 9, which is what we've discussed so far.
Well, we
correct?
actually haven't. We kind of just stopped at number 3 and have been working on that. That's why I would suggest we leave it at number 3, and we may just need to review 4 through 9 at our next meeting and just zoom on from there. But I would suggest, for organizational purposes, let's call it a cut at 3 this evening, rather than continue.
We did talk about 6 with the changing it to review and opine for the audit.
Yeah, we did. That's correct.
Well, maybe Lucy can just then just recap for 1 through 3, or 1 through 6, whichever, just to make sure we at least have that down.
Well, as far as I can see, 1 is has no comment, nor 2.
No, yeah.
3 is that we're going to remove the partnership entities. Possibly, we're going to consider removing the partnership entities as an item, but leave the language as it is, on the expectation that it'll be pursued up the line. But this is very much the core of what I think some of us are expecting what the COC to do. Review and comment on work plans. I don't think that there's any problem with that. Review the books and records of the MWPA as
We'll get to those things, though. So
and then 5 was approve and the review and opine the
Yeah.
annual audit, and that's what I got, unless I missed something.
Very good. No, I think you've got it, and Max gave you a thumbs up, and that's official.
Okay.
So there you have it. With that, I'll open it one last time to the public, see if the public has any last comments they'd like to make. And seeing none, do I have a motion? Stephen, would you like to speak?
No, I'm moving that we adjourn.
Yeah, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
second,
Oh,
Okay.
Mark, do we, process question?
Please, yes, Larry.
Do we need to have a motion to continue this to the next meeting?
Yeah, I second it.
Yeah, we do have to have a motion to continue, and just also a reminder, we have information items and COC member requests for future items still. And
My fault, sorry.
no worries. And with the Rosenberg rules, which although you haven't formally adopted, you actually can just say adjourn. You don't have to do a move in motion. And but while I'm speaking, I really do want to thank especially the ad hoc subcommittee members, the amount of time that you have put into these bylaws shows the passion and your commitment to MWPA succeeding. I very much appreciate that. And then the rest of the committee, you guys are awesome. I enjoy working with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Night,
Okay,
everybody.
so,
All right, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, be good.
all right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all. And
Just so make sure we are official, we have a motion and a second to continue. And Allison,
Yes.
right.
Allison, can you do a roll call to make sure that we have a majority vote?
Yeah, they were jumping off too quick. I wanted to come back.
Committee Member Kingston?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Committee Member Cole, I
Let's
apologize.
adjourn.
Committee Member Manikis?
Yes.
Committee Member Keys?
Yes.
Committee Member Dilworth?
Yes.
Committee Member Suggs?
Rebecca, you can wave. Yes.
Yes. Committee Member Randolph?
Yes.
Committee Member Chu?
Yes.
Committee Member Perry?
Yes.
Committee Member Longstreth? I believe you've jumped.
She jumped.
Motion passes.
Thank you,
Great.
Allison.
Okay,
That's it?
that's it. Do we have information items? Was that it? Was that the next? I'm sorry, I'm not on the agenda at the moment.
Information items and then COC requests for future agenda items, which I think we've already received.
We've already received that information. Lucy?
Actually, I did have a couple of items that I wanted to bring up for the agenda, which is that we start working on our policies and procedures and a code of conduct, so that would be part of a working group and a subcommittee that we could start working on thinking about this sort of things.
Very good. Mark, what is the schedule for the next MWPA Board of Directors meeting? Is that coming up soon?
January 21st, 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. It is the board retreat. And we anticipate the business portion of the meeting to be no more than a half an hour. And then the rest of it will be the retreat.
Very good, very good. And I'll just give a couple of announcements that tomorrow, the biomass group will be meeting, the carbon resource group will be meeting, and MCL Parks and Open Space will be meeting. And sometimes they touch upon our subjects. Then Friday, we have, ESP has a vegetation management meeting at 1. And if anyone wants information, feel free to contact me on that, and I can give you dates and times and such, if you're not on our list. With that, all have a wonderful evening. It was a pleasure this evening with you. Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone.
Good night.
And a shout out for Bruce Bartell for sticking with us the whole time.
Yes, Bruce. Yay, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
You're our hero.
Thanks to Bruce and Ron for all the great comments too.
Yes.
Take care.
Take
And I'll
care.
say hello to Allison.
Take care, everybody.
Hello, good to see you.